Andrew Rosenberg Law. Clear plans. Peace of mind. Andrew Rosenberg Law. Plan it right, protect it all. Andrew Rosenberg Law. Guiding you when life gets hard. Andrew Rosenberg Law. Peace of mind, secure your future. Andrew Rosenberg Law. If you don't plan, you're stupid.
Welcome back to If You Don't Plan, You're Stupid with Florida estate planning attorney Andrew Rosenberg. Andy helps South Florida families protect their assets, avoid legal messes, and plan ahead so they don't lose everything to long-term care costs. I'm LeAnn Lyon, and today we are talking about Medicaid gifting penalties, one of the biggest misunderstandings families have when they try to help their kids financially. Hello, Andy. Great to see you again.
Hey, LeAnn. How are you on this Friday? I hope you have a good weekend coming up.
So good. Absolutely. And what's really fun is I've been looking forward to this episode since our last episode when we said we were going to talk about Medicaid. I know that sounds like, wow, you're excited to talk about Medicaid, but it's such an important topic. And especially for people in my generation, I'm Gen X, and we're kind of in that in-between generation right now. So
Who's Gen X, by the way? I don't know what I am. Am I a Gen X too? What's considered Gen X?
boomers go to about 1965-ish. And then about 1965 to I think 1985, they consider us to be Gen X.
So I'm Gen X as well. There you go. But I know exactly what you mean. I got my in-laws and I got my kids and I had my parents who've passed away, unfortunately, but we're in the middle of everything right now. And I'm in the middle of wedding planning on top of everything. So there you go. We're taking my in-laws to the hospital and dealing with doctors, and we got a wedding at the same time, which is a definition of the sandwich generation.
Right. And there's always a sandwich generation. And, in the world that we live in and the nation that we live in, where oftentimes, we're looking for help with end of life or Medicaid type things. That's what we're talking about today. So what exactly counts as a gift under Florida's Medicaid rules, and why does that matter?
So, yeah, well, let's take a step back and let's explain what we're talking about, because it's very, very, very confusing, this topic. And you're not going to learn it all in this particular episode, guys, but we're going to try to get a better explanation of the situation. So people get confused between Medicare and Medicaid. Okay, there's a difference. Medicare is what you have for the first 50, 60 days in a hospital, whatever, or however it works. I don't even know the exact rules for all of that. But Medicare does not pay for assisted living or long-term care or home health care or anything like that for the long term. That's where Medicaid comes in, if you qualify, okay? So there's Medicare that will help at the early beginning stages for a couple of weeks, maybe at most. And then after that, it's going to come from your insurance, if you have it, or from your assets, or if you don't have the assets, Medicaid will pay for everything. So it's very confusing just right off the top. That's already confusing for everybody. So I'm trying to make sure. Did that make sense, LeAnn?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the best way to pay for, when we're talking about Medicaid, guys, we're usually talking about mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever you know. They need home health care, they need assisted living care, they need nursing home care. One of those situations. So number one, the best way to pay for all of that stuff is to have long-term care insurance. Unfortunately, I've been doing this for a long time, LeAnn, and I meet with clients daily, and I will tell you, on average, I'm giving you a number, 98% of the people that I meet with do not have long-term care insurance. Why? Because it's freaking expensive. Okay? And it's a lot of them aren't even good, and they don't pay for half the things that need to be paid for, and it's very expensive and they can't afford it. I'll give you an example. My in-laws, they have a very good policy. Okay. The problem is, and I get the call from my in-laws all the time. Once a year, I get a call from them. The problem is, there's my dog if you're watching the video. The problem is, um, every year, almost every year, they're paying a premium for the long-term care insurance to keep it in force. And then something happens within the industry and they have to increase the premium amount for everybody across the board. And so then the insurance company comes back to like my in-laws and they say, hey, listen, you need to pay more for the same amount of insurance for the long-term care, and they can't afford it. And so what happens is a lot of these people will drop it. They'll just say, I can't afford it anymore. And they will stop carrying the long-term care insurance. And then of course, what happens is a year or two later, they need it. And it's too late at that point. So that's the problem, is that most people won't have the long-term care insurance in place. So then that's when we got to deal with what we're talking about today, which is how do you plan for that to make sure that you don't lose all these assets that you've built up for your entire life, working so hard, that you don't lose it all to pay for the nursing home or assisted living. And that's the issue, LeAnn. That is the issue of this whole Medicaid process. And the concerns that we have is, if you need to have home health care, nursing home care, assisted living care, and you don't have insurance to pay for it, it's going to be paid by what you have as far as your assets and your income, until it's dwindled down to nothing. When it gets dwindled down to nothing, that's when Medicaid will pay for things.
And therefore, people think, well, I'll help whittle it down. I'll start gifting.
Right? I'll give to
Right,
my grandkids. I'll give to my kids. And
right.
that makes total sense. And I agree that, well, do it. Why not do it? The problem is, it's a disaster for Medicaid planning. Okay. Because in Florida, now other states might be different, but in Florida, I see my little grand dog in the background playing now. So if you're watching, I hope you enjoy that as well. In Florida, we have what's called a 5-year look back period. Okay. Other states might have different 5-year periods. They might have 7 years, but most have a 5-year look back period. And what that means is that, let's say, LeAnn, that my father-in-law his name's Steve. He has to go into a nursing home, and Steve files the paperwork to get into the nursing home, and he wants to get on Medicaid, and he gifted money to me, right? There's going to be a 5-year look back. And that's the problem, is that there is a 5-year look back period on all gifting that was done. And it will come back into the situation. And there's going to be a penalty for you to get qualified so that Medicaid will pay for things. That's the problem.
And what does that mean, a penalty?
So let me give you an example. Let's say we got $30,000 that was gifted to me and my wife and my kids, my in-laws. Okay, they did that, right? Now he wants to go to a nursing home, but he wants to have Medicaid pay for everything. Well, so you fill out the Medicaid application, you file the application, and they're immediately going to want to see 5 years of brokerage accounts, 5-year tax returns, etc. And then they're going to see that money went, 30,000 went out. And so there's a formula that is used. The formula is whatever the gift amount was done. So in this case, 30,000 gets divided by a specific number. In Florida, to give you an example, the number is $10,645. So if we took 30,000 divided by 10,645, let's say that equates to about 3. So that means that we have a 3-month penalty before he could qualify for Medicaid with just that gift. Did that make sense?
So it's a time penalty,
It's a time penalty.
which relates to a financial penalty as well.
Of course, because now you got 3 months. Okay, he's filed. He wants to go into the nursing home, and Medicaid says you'll qualify but you have a 3-month penalty, which means he has to pay out of pocket for 3 months. And the nursing home expenses are 10 to 15,000 a month
Sure.
at a minimum. So that's, you know, $30,000 going out the door, in addition to the gifting that he already gave, and he's not going to get that money back because we spent it already, as an example. So
Right.
that's why gifting can be an issue, can it be a big issue. So I'd like to kind of bring it back, LeAnn, to help explain to people how this works. I like to use I always like pictures, as you know. So I'm going to describe something. So imagine we have a bar stool, and there's 3 legs to the bar stool, right? Any one of those legs breaks, and you're going to fall if you're sitting on it. So imagine Medicaid is that bar stool, and we have 3 legs. The first leg is medical necessity. The second leg is income. The third leg is assets. We have to have all 3, and they all 3 have to qualify in order for Medicaid to pay for things. So first is the medical necessity. What that means is, does my father-in-law have the necessity to have a nursing home or assisted living? So they do an assessment. Okay. They ask questions to me as the kid, as the supervisor of my father-in-law. Does he have A, B, C, D? We answer the questions, and then they'll go out and look at him for a minute and say, oh yeah, they'll rate him from 1 to 5, and you want to get a 5. The goal is to get a 5. We already know the questions in advance, so we know how to kind of prepare people for that. But then the second and third legs are the issues. That's where the big issues come in. The income side and the asset side. Okay. Let's talk about the asset side. The asset side, guess how much money you can have before you can qualify for Medicaid to pay for the assisted living nursing home? How much do you think you can own in assets?
$100,000.
2,000. You can only have $2,000 in your name to qualify individually. Married couple, 4,000. So you got to be destitute, basically. Yeah, it's crazy. So
I mean, that's
so
lower than most people live on in a month.
of course, so the amount of asset you have is if you have more than $2,000, that bar stool is going to break and you will not qualify.
Oh,
We'll talk about how we handle it in a minute.
yeah.
Now the third leg is the income. Okay. The income. Guess how much income on a monthly basis you're allowed to have to still qualify for Medicaid? Tell me what you think. Just take a guess. How much money can you make in a month and still qualify to have Medicaid pay?
Ugh, boy, I'm gonna have to guess really low, $1,000.
All right, that's a great guess. Actually, you can have more.
Okay.
In Florida, I'm talking Florida, obviously,
Right.
you can make, as an individual, this is 2026 numbers, $1,982 per month.
Okay.
But that includes what counts as the income. IRA distributions count as income. Pensions count as income. Social Security, but the gross Social Security, not the net that you get, because they take things out before you get it. So it's very quickly, you're going to be above the income issue. So this is where all this, what we're talking about today, this whole Medicaid process, Medicaid planning comes in. So the question becomes, how do you deal with it if someone comes in and they have $300,000 of assets and they're making $4,000 a month of income? Both of those legs of the stool are going to break. So that's why you have to meet with an elder law attorney, which we are, obviously, which I am. So there are things that we can do. Okay. Real quick, I'm just going to give you a quick summary on a typical thing we can do. Number one, if you have more than the $2,000 a month, $2,000 of assets, anything above that, what we try to do usually is create something called a personal service contract, personal service agreement, and we move anything above that into this agreement. And that goes, usually you have your kids or someone that you trust handling the money. And by doing that, you're now below the $2,000 threshold. On the income side, you make 4,000 a month, let's just say you're 2,000 over. We'll round it up to, so we're going to move, say 2,200. You want to be below the number. We're going to move 2,200 into an irrevocable trust. Okay. It's called a rabbi trust. It's called a qualified income trust. And that, 2,000, 2,200 a month goes into this irrevocable trust. And then the irrevocable trust, the only thing there is a bank account. And so the money gets pushed into that bank account every month. And then your kids are probably going to be in charge of the irrevocable trust. And your kids can use that money to spend on you for things. And that's how you get people qualified for Medicaid. So when people gift, like we talked about, LeAnn, and they think they're doing the right things, it ends up being a nightmare for someone like me, because now we got a look back period, and now we got that penalty period, and we're like, what do we do? And so we have to really figure out, and every case is different. We have to really figure out the situation. I mean, right after this meeting, I'm meeting with someone that has, that's making 4,800 a month income. She's single. 4,800 a month of income, has about 850,000 of assets, and needs to go into a nursing home. And they want to know, both kids want to know, what can we do? So we're going to have this exact discussion that you and I are having right now.
So, quick question. Are there any transfers or situations that Medicaid considers exceptions, meaning that they won't trigger that time and money penalty?
Yes, there are. So one of the things is transfers to a spouse if you're married. That won't count. Okay, so we got one spouse that needs to go into an assisted living or nursing, and the other one's fine. So we'll do a lot of transferring of assets to the other spouse's name. There's things like that counts. If you have a disabled child, okay, so someone that is blind or permanently disabled, or that, are exempt, they're exempt. So if you transfer assets there, that wouldn't count. Okay. If you have a minor child under 21, we can transfer some assets there. That won't count for Medicaid penalty purposes. So those are some of the examples, but there are not many. There are not many, because the federal government and the state don't want to pay for things unless we really need to pay for things. So it's really complicated and difficult, and that's why you need an attorney to handle the process from start to finish, to make sure we get them qualified and on the books, and have Medicaid pay for things.
Not to mention, the rules and laws are changing all the time. So, as we wrap up here, and this is for somebody who's maybe already made some gifts within the last few years, what steps can they take now to minimize the impact?
So one thing you can always do is you can cure the gift. So you can give the money back. That's one way to fix it. Now, the odds of that happening are slim to none. Because once you get the gift, they're going to spend it on stuff or whatever. It's gone. So, but you can cure the gift. That's one way of doing it. The other way is, there are, one of the tricks of the trade that we can do, if it makes sense, is we enter into that personal service agreement that we talked about, that personal service contract, and we make sure that we put language in there that explains that it started back when the gift started, so that we're putting a agreed upon principle in writing now, but that it started back when the gift started. So there are tricks to the trade that we can try to do to try and get things to work in the proper fashion.
So, I have one final question. How can people prepare? What do they need to do now if listening to this podcast has stirred up a little something in them?
Yeah. So we can plan for the future. Okay. There's that 5-year look back that we talked about. So there are lots of times. I just met with someone the other day, and husband and wife, they're not sick, but they're concerned about it. So we can do something called an asset protection trust, a Medicaid asset protection trust, and we set up an irrevocable trust now, and then we move assets into it now and hope nothing happens over the next 5 years. So there are things that we can do, okay? But here's what I want people to understand from this episode. at least in Florida, you need to understand there are things that we can do, that Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, the 5-year plan that we can do. But also what you really need to understand is that Florida allows us as elder care attorneys to do crisis Medicaid planning. So if you don't plan and mom, dad, brother, sister need taken care of now and it's an emergency, which is most of the time for us, we can do all these things that we talked about overnight, basically. And we can
Beautiful.
get things qualified. And that's what you need to know. That's Florida. Other states are not like that.
Well, that is it for today's episode of If You Don't Plan, You're Stupid. Medicaid rules are complicated, and even small gifts can create big delays when care is needed. If you want to make sure your planning protects your family and keeps you eligible when the time comes, visit rosenberglawfirm.net to get started. And remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who may need to hear it. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.
If you don't plan, you're stupid.